Hey guys, welcome back to my Freecodecamp JavaScript Intermediate JavaScript Algorithm Scripting Challenges. This is a tutorial videos where I go through each of these questions with you guys. Last time we met, we did everything be true, and today we're going to be tackling this argument optional assignment. I think out of the ones we've done so far, this might be the most difficult, but it's a fun one. So if you haven't tried this already, please pause the video now, try it out on your own, try very carefully, try to make the test all pass, and whether you've succeeded or failed, come back to this video and I'll show you multiple different ways that we could approach this problem. Let's check out what this problem is all about. It says here, create a function that sums two arguments together. If only one argument is provided, then return a function that expects one argument and returns the sum. For example, add together 2, 3 should return 5, and add together 2 parentheses should return a function. Calling this return function with a single argument will then return the sum. var sum2 and add together 2, sum2 and 3 returns 5. If either argument isn't a valid number, return undefined. All right, so this is kind of complicated. Hopefully, if you read this maybe like 5 or 6 times, it might make a little bit more sense. Let's go through each cases together, okay? So let's think about this. If we have add together 2 to 3, this is the most basic example that we could have. This should give us 5. We just add the two things together. If we just had, for example, add together 2 without any second parameter, what should this give us? This should give us back a function. And what I mean by that is it should give us back a function that kind of looks like this. It might be a little complicated, but it'll be pretty much, it takes in argument, and if arg is a number, or rather if the num parameter is a number, then return 2 plus num. So this is what it will return. It looks fairly complicated, but let me give you a more practical, not a practical, but a more visual example of that. If you were to put 2 and then 3, then this, the output of this part right here, add together 2, will be a function, and then that function will take this 3 as a parameter, and then it will add up the two numbers to again give us 5. So that's a little bit more complicated. What other situations we have? We have this situation. If either argument isn't a valid number, return undefined. So add together maybe like hello and 3 should give us undefined. I'm just going to list out all the possible scenarios that I could think of. Add together maybe 2 and then hi should give us undefined. What else? Add together, how about this? Another function version. We could have a valid number here, but if we had, let's say, howdy as a second function call, then since this isn't a number, we can't add them together. So this should also give us undefined. There might be other situations, but I think we'll stick with these. And I think these are fairly important, so I'm just going to keep them in my code, and let's go on to and try to solve this problem. Let's bring this code over to our example, and let's try our very best to solve this problem. All right, so what is the best way to solve this problem? We have another situation here. They don't give us any parameters. So how can we grab the parameters that they give us? And remember, they could either give us 2 parameters or 1 at a time, like so. So how do we grab them? So I mean, one, I guess we could just do this. But if we want to be pure and stick with the function shape that they have given us, one way we could grab the parameters is with the arguments keyword. Keep this in mind. This will only work if we have a function that uses the traditional function notation and not the Es6 arrow notation. This will only work for the function notation. Later, I will show you guys how to do this with the arrow notation. But the arguments keyword works when you're in a traditional function notation. And how you do it, let's just console log what the arguments keyword is here for this example right here. Let's run the tests. we get the console log of arguments is this weird object that has keys as indices and the values as whatever we have put here. So let's say we did hi and hello here, then we should see hi and hello. So this is how we access our arguments even though it's not explicitly defined in our parameters. Now how do we put this into good use? So there are two ways to do this. So we could do this. We could either use the capital array, one of the methods with array, and it's array.from, and let's pass in our arguments keyword. So this gets some type of an object or something, and it creates an array out of it. It creates an array out of the values of that object. Let's see what we get here. So now we have an array with our arguments. If we only pass in one argument like so, we will only see one element in the argument like so. This is one way to do it. Let me just put back 2, 3 here. A shorter notation of this is to just make an array like this and just spread the arguments. This will separate the values of the arguments in comma separated. So if we do this, we get back 2, 3. And this is what I'm going to use here. So let's say this. We will say const args is ... arguments. As a matter of, and then now if we console log args, we get back the same thing. Let me just show you guys. But I want to do something a little bit more efficient. I want a variable assigned to each of the arguments instead of this array that has all of the arguments. So I guess one way we could do this is this const arg1 is what? Args at index 0, and const arg2 is args at index 1. So this will definitely work. If we do arg1 here and arg2 here, we should see 2 and 3 as expected. But this is we're using 3 lines of code just to destructure, just to extract the arguments from this array structure. There's an easier way to do it, and it is called destructuring. And we want to destructure from this array the arguments, the 0th index and the 1st index. So the way that we do that is we put brackets here and we put the variable name that we want for those arguments. So the 0 index element that we want to extract out of, that we want to destructure out of this array, we're going to call it arg1. And the next one we want is arg2. Now let's see what happens if we console log that. Hopefully we get 2 and 3. There we go. Just to convince you guys that this works more, let's put 34.3 here. And we do get 34.3. So this looks nice and concise. So now we have access to our arguments, even though they're not explicitly defined in our parameters. All right, so now we have a little bit of a problem here. The argument 1 could take the shape of many different things. And argument 2, it could very well be that it's not even there. Like, look at this one here. There is no argument 2 for this function call. Ignore this 3 right here because that's the second function call. So, however, let's not deal with the second parameter yet. Let's just deal with arg1, the first parameter. This is how we should isolate the problem so that we don't get overwhelmed. Let's just consider argument 1. What are the scenarios that we are looking for in argument 1? So here's scenario number 1. It's a number, right? Scenario number 2 is what? Let's read here. It says, if either argument isn't a valid number, return undefined. So I could think of 2 scenarios for the first argument. Is it a number? And is it undefined? So let's make two branching conditions based upon those 2 outcomes. So we will say, how do we test to see if arg1 is a number? So JavaScript provides this keyword called type of, one word, type of. Let's say if type of arg1 is triple equals to a number. We write this as a string and make sure it's all lowercase. So this is checking to see if arg1 is a number. What do we want to do then? We want to do something. But what I want to do, just to make sure that this works, is I want to console log arg1 is a number. And if it's not a number, let's console log it's not a number. It's not a number. Okay, let's see what happens here. For our example of 34, it says arg1 is a number, so that's good. What if we had args here? Then it says arg1 is not a number. What if we had this link? Let me just show you guys. This might be a little redundant, I'm sorry, but let's just do it with it. And it says arg1 is not a number. So this will check for the two scenarios. Now, what do we want to do? Let me put back to 2 here. Let's take care of the easier scenario first. It's this one. What happens when it's not a number? We could do this. If it's not a number, what does it say? Return undefined. So all we gotta do is return undefined. Now we don't need this. So we took care of the easy one first, and then we're gonna deal with the hard scenario. However, in my opinion, there's a cleaner way to do this, because most likely the stuff that goes inside this if condition here, it will be a lot of things that goes on here, because we gotta take care of argument 2 and so on. So we have all this logic, and the simple one is in the bottom. So this might be a little bit more harder to read. So if you want to make this easier to read, and what I'm going to do is highly subjective, but I think it will be cleaner. We could say if type of number is not a number, then return undefined. Take care of the easy stuff first so that whoever reads our code can see, okay, the easy stuff, you just return undefined. Otherwise, then do the long stuff here. I think that's easier to read. And as a matter of fact, if you return undefined in this if condition, you don't even need this else. So if you don't like nesting things too much, we could just do things here. So let me test that out for you guys. Console log outside the if. If type of 1 is not a number, return undefined. Otherwise, we're going to console log outside the if. And here, let's just console log inside. So again, we come in here when it's not a number. So for example, let's say we had hello here. Then we should see console log of inside. And we do that. However, if this was a number, then outside the if. So one of the reasons why many people, including me, don't like using this else condition here, we don't like using it when we don't have to, because it just makes things more nested. We got these two curly braces. We like to keep things flat as much as possible. Of course, if we have to nest it, then we would, but in this case, we don't have to, because we're returning something here. So if it goes in here, it will never reach out here. All right. Now we have considered, remember there were two situations, two type of outcomes that arg1 can have. Either it's not a number. By the way, let's get rid of these console logs. Either it's not a number, in which we return undefined, or it is a number. Now, what if it is a number? Then what are the scenarios we have? So here, we could either have argument, the second argument be a number, in which case it will give us a number. There might not even be a second number, in which case we have to return a function. We'll deal with that later. We also have the second argument may not be a number, and so on. So let's consider this scenario. What if, I think the easiest one, what if the second argument is not a number? So you might think we have to do this. If type of R2 is not a number, then return undefined. You might think that this will work, but this will actually, we are missing one scenario here. This will actually not make it so that it won't pass all the tests. And let me explain to you why that is. But let me just put some console logs somewhere. We will say here, console log R2 was not a number. And then we'll return undefined. And if it wasn't this, we'll say console log R2 was a number. Now let's see why this may not work. Let's see if it works for this one. And we know that it will work if it says R2 was a number. Let's see what happens if we run this code. And it says R2 was a number. So it seems like it works. And let's say we put a number that's second argument that's not a number. Then correctly, we will see that it will say R2 was not a number. As you can see here, so you went inside this if condition, which is what we wanted. Now, this is where it will break. What if we have this condition? This condition should give us 5, but look at what happens here. 2 and 3. Let's see what happens. Well, it breaks. But before it broke, it said R2 was not a number. So why did that happen? In this example, what is argument 2 in the first function call? There is no argument 2. So let's console log what argument 2 was for that example. We have undefined here. So this is a valuable lesson. If a parameter is not defined, it takes the value of undefined by default. So it's checking. So R2 is undefined. It goes to this if condition. It says if type of 2 is not a number. Now undefined is not a number. So it will go in here and it will console log us R2 is not a number and return undefined. Now it's erroring out because it was expecting a function call immediately after, but we didn't give it a function. That's why it's erroring out. But that's why this if condition will not work. We first have to make sure that R2 exists, or if it doesn't exist, we have to do something else. So let's take care of that right now. We will say if we could do this, R2 is triple equals to undefined keyword, no quotation mark, then we are assuming that we want to return a function call here, right? Like in this case, this add together 2 should return a function call, and where we call that function again with a number, then it should return us the sum of those two numbers. So that's a little bit more complicated thing to do. So we will just say here to do return a function. We will take care of this difficult situation later. Now, since we have taken care of the undefined scenario, now we could do this. Now, if by the time we get to down here, we know that R2 has to exist. Because if it didn't exist, it would have gone through this if condition and it would have done something in here. So now that we're here, we know that R2 exists. Now that we know they exist, if it's not a number, we could just say R2 was not a number and return undefined. Let's see if that works. And let me just put a return here so that we don't break the code, or we also break the code. But at least we didn't get a console log. For this 2.3, before we got this R2 was not a number by mistake, but now we don't even get that. We just break the code. That's still better, trust me. However, if we put like hi here, no, not this one, sorry, on the second argument, like so, then we should see R2 was not a number and we should return undefined. See, R2 was not a number. All right, so that is good. We are getting there to the end. Let's think of the final scenario. So we have if the type of R2 is not a number, do this. What's the last scenario? The last scenario is R2 is a number. And I could put here like if, or I could even put an else if here or else, but I know that it's the last scenario that we're dealing with. So I could just assume if the code has reached to this line, then we are dealing with two numbers, a number for A and a number for argument 2. So we could just say return arg1 plus arg2 in this scenario. Let's see if we get 5 for our original example here. Let me console log the result. Like so, and we get 5, so that is good. All right, so what has left, let me get rid of this console log. We are almost done. The only thing we have left to do is return a function here, and then hopefully I think we have taken care of every single scenario. Okay, so how do we return a function? So you return a function by literally just returning a function like so. And the function that we're creating will expect one argument, as you can see here or here, and it will try to add the two numbers up. So let's call this argument maybe, what should we call it? I don't want to call it R2 because we already defined the R2 here. Let's just call it, I'm just going to call it num. Okay, and let's make a function here. And what do we want to do? Normally, we want to return straight away from this function. Argument 1, remember argument 1, there's 2 here, plus the argument from the second function call. In our case, that's called the num variable. So normally we would do this. However, we have to be careful. What if the second function call gave us something that was not a number? Then we have to return undefined. A lot of undefineds here. So we have to say if type of number is not a number, we want to return undefined again. Otherwise, we want to return arg1 plus num. All right, now let's see if this took care of our two situations that we were concerned about. Let's just first make sure that this still gives us the addition. It does right here. Now let's try this one. 2, 3, they should give us 5. And I'm going to change up the number so that we don't get a false positive. So maybe let's do like 5, 4, which should give us 9. So again, here we're returning a function here if we coded everything correctly. And that function will store this 5 number as a variable and then add it to this whatever second call we give it. And we do get 9. Hallelujah. All right, now let's see if our function call inside here took care of the undefined scenario, this one here, where the first number was a number, but the second one is not a number. Let's see if that gives us undefined. And that does. That's very good. Okay, so this passed, this passed, this passed. Let's just make sure that this passes one more time. Let's make sure we get undefined. Undefined, good. This should give us undefined. I think we already tested that, but let's just test it one more time. Undefined, very good. And this we just checked right now. So all of these scenarios that we thought about passed. So this is a good approach, I think, a good example of how to approach these type of complicated problems. You think about all the scenarios that you could think of, and you write the output of them, and then try to code along to solve one of these scenarios at a time. And we have tackled every single scenario. Now let's see if maybe we missed something, and that's possible, and that's fine. But let's copy this code, bring it over to Freecodecamp, and let's see if they like it. And it passes. All right, so I want to do some refactoring. I was really thinking about how to make this like really concise, and I don't know, I have a habit of making this concise in these videos. Concise doesn't necessarily mean better. As a matter of fact, the most important thing about creating functions is the readability. You want to make sure that it's readable. So I'm not going to do anything crazy here. However, I want to show you guys how to do this if you like the Es6 Arrow Notation. As I said before, this arguments keyword doesn't work if you're dealing with Es6 Arrow Notation. Let me show you guys what I'm talking about. Let's do const, add together, put a parenthesis here, put an equal sign here, and put an arrow there. Let's see if our example here works. Let me just put a colon here. It seems to work, but let's do this. Let's console log what arg1 and arg2 is. Okay. Remember, we're destruction from this arguments keyword what arg1 and arg2 is, and we're in an arrow function right now. The examples we're giving it is 2 and high. Let's see what we get. We get this crazy thing right here, this object. So pretty much, it doesn't work. This arguments keyword, it doesn't give us the arguments that we want in Es6 Arrow Notation. So if we don't write anything in the parameter, it's actually impossible to get the parameters here. So what they want us to do instead is this. Just, if you don't want to explicitly write the arguments like this, like arg2 like this, then you want to just put everything in a spread operator. And maybe we could call it args. It doesn't actually matter what you call it here. You call it high, but we'll call it args. We can't call this part arguments because that's actually a reserved keyword. So we'll just call it args. And now with this args, let's see what the console log of that is. What is args? Let's run this. And what is args right here? Ignore this thing right here. It's because I'm console logging this right here. Let's get rid of that. Args is 2 and high. So it pretty much gives us the same thing as you doing this. Brackets, ... arguments. Args becomes the same thing. So this is how this is the ES6 way. If you have X amount of parameters, you just wrap the functions or parameters in this ... args notation. This is the spread operator. It grabs every single argument and puts them in an array. Now we could just treat this args as what? As the arguments keyword here. So we could just replace this part with args and our function should still work. And while let me just make sure it works. We get undefined for this example. And if you put a 3 here, we should get a 5. Yep. Now, why don't we might as well replace this part with the arrow notation too. So let's do return the parameters first. Since we only have one parameter, we could get rid of the parentheses and an arrow sign here. Now we could shorten this part inside here. Let's use our ternary operator. We will say, I'm going to return right away. Return if type of number is not a number. If that is true, return undefined. We don't need to write return here because we wrote that return here. Else, return arg1 plus 1. So this looks kind of confusing, but take my word for it, this works. And look at this, return, that's very nasty. This whole thing inside of our function here is one expression. So instead of having this return keyword and this curly brace, we could just return this whole shape right away like so. We could say if this is type of number is that, if that's true, return undefined, else return 1 like so. So that should work. Let's just, before we do some more refactoring, let's just make sure that this passes all of our tests. And it doesn't. So let's see what happened. Return num if type of num is not a number. And look at the one that it failed. It failed the one in this situation here. Let's see. Yes, in this one. So should return 5, but if type of number is not a number, return undefined. Otherwise, oh, we did arg1 plus 1. I don't know why I wrote arg1 plus 1. It should actually be arg1 plus num because that's the parameter that we're given. Now let's see if this passes the tests. And it does, so that's good. All right, so I said in the beginning that I wasn't gonna really do like a short, concise way of doing it because it's not readable, but I already talked about ternary operator, so let's just try to do something with that here. I'm gonna replace this part here. I don't want to waste a line on just spreading this. I know that at most we're always gonna be dealing with 2 arguments, so might as well just write them here. Usually you want to do something like this, args, when you don't know the amount of arguments you're going to expect. So for example, let's say you made a function that gives you the average of all the numbers that you put. You could put 2 numbers, you could put 5 numbers, you could put 100 numbers. It will just give you the average of everything. In that case, since you don't know how much parameters you need, you'll use the args method. But in our case, we will always have at most 2 arguments. So I'm just going to bring that here. And we have this scenario here. If type of 1 is not a number, do something. Otherwise, and then we got this whole big condition here. So let's try to shorten this up a little bit more. This will be nasty, but we'll just try. We will say return, and I'm not gonna return. I know I'm gonna have one expression in here anyways. So I'm gonna try to get rid of these parentheses here, and I'm gonna say, let's see, type of arg1 is not a number. If that's the case, what do we want to do? We want to return undefined. Else, now what do we want to do? We want to have another condition. And I'm sorry, this is hard to follow. There's just not really a better way to do this. Now we want to test other things. Now that we know it is a number, we want to test a couple more things. Now, if arg2 is undefined, then what do we want to do? Then we want to return this function num. In this one also test type of num is not a number. Then undefined. Let me put this into the next line. otherwise arg1 plus num. That takes care of that scenario. And now finally we have another scenario, not finally, type of R2 is not a number. Then we want to return undefined again. And finally, just if none of those scenarios are true, then return. Oh, by the way, we don't need this return keyword. Just do arg1 plus arg2. Okay, so this is not recommended. Don't ever write code like this. Like, who can actually read this, right? But I just want to show you guys that we can. Let's see if this works. It might not even work, to be honest. Run the test and it passes. Hey guys, thank you for joining me again in this Freecodecamp JavaScript tutorial videos. Today we did a pretty long one and a fairly difficult one, and that was arguments optional. The next time we meet, we'll be doing this make a person one. And just to give you guys a heads up, this is the first time in this series of tutorial videos that we'll be dealing with object-oriented programming. So this has to deal with OOP, and JavaScript has its own flavor of object-oriented programming. So this will be pretty fun to do. If you haven't tried this one, please try it out yourself before you watch my video. And then after you try it, check out my video. I'll release it very soon. So please stay tuned. If you like my content, please click like. And if you don't like it, click dislike. Give me some feedback below. Let me know if you want me to do another tutorial series or whatever. I release these algorithm challenge videos on a pretty frequent basis, almost daily. And I also release project-based videos such as React projects or JavaScript projects. I also release informational videos. Recently, I released 2020 Web Developer Roadmap, a complete guide. So that will be in the links description below. I hope you guys are having a great day, and I'll see you guys next time.